everyone, welcome to the new video. So this is video 9 of Kubernetes playlist series, and this video is on ConfigMap and secrets. So this is one of the most important topic in Kubernetes, and I made video on this earlier too, but today we will see this in detail for the people who are following this playlist. So yeah, let's go. So in this video, we will cover what is externalized configuration, what is the difference between config map and secret, how to inject them as environment variables, how to mount them as files, and why secrets are not encrypted by default. Okay. So externalizing configuration means that instead of putting the configurations or important data in the code, like in our application source code or in our docker image or application.properties, we store them outside the code and inject them during the runtime as environment variables, or you mount them at file like volumes, but we are not keeping the important application or the configuration inside the code. So same image and multiple environments, change config. Why? Because we can use same image like these configurations. If we if we hard code and keep it in source code, then we cannot implement reusability. So in order to implement reusability, so that we can use the same source code for multiple environments, or we change config we without rebuilding image, better security, and follow 12 factor app principle. So 12 factor app principle is like a methodology where the secrets are, or the configurations are separated from the code, and they are injected as environment variables. So config map is like storing a non-sensitive configuration, but the configuration which will be different for different environment, we store them as config map. Okay. And we have to use them as environment variables or application settings or properties file. So we use config map, and those are YAML or JSON file. Suppose the app mode is equal to dev, logging level, debug, feature flags. So in these kind of configuration, when we have to store, we use config map. How we create config map? We will give API version v1, kind will be config map, name of the config map, and then what data we need to keep in the config, that app mode, log level, and that's it. Just by doing it, it is separate from our code. And just by doing it, if we do kubectl apply -f, and if we see that after applying it, we'll see that when we do kubectl get config map or kubectl describe config map with this config map, we will see what the data has been stored or with what name the config map got created. Once a config map has been created, now we have to inject config map as environment variable so that the pod or the application source code can use it. So now what we will do, when the pod that we are going to create for the application, there we have to mention the environment from, and there we will mention that the environment variables should be picked from config map ref configuration config map, and the name is app config. The name of the config map app config that we have created, that has to be given. So now when pod gets created, gets an idea that the configurations of the of this pod, or the application or the image that is going to run, that should be picked from app config. So this is a simple form where we are injecting the config map as an environment variable. Okay. Now if we do kubectl exec -it config map demo, the demo config map demo is a pod name, and if we do print env, that is in print environment variables of that pod, we will see this data. So now Kubernetes has automatically injected them as we have used config map. Now there is another way. There are two ways that we can do, like two most popular ways. Another way is mount config map as files. So first of all, we will have to create a volume from that config map. Okay, and then we need to mount that volume to particular mount path. So first of all, we are creating the config map volume from config map app config that we created, and then we are using volume mount, and we are mounting the config map volume that we created from the config map to this mount path slash etc. Now if we do similarly, after once this you follow this method and you do kubectl exec -it and the demo name, and if you ls, this command is going inside the container. Okay, and then if we do ls, the list of the files inside, or inside the etc config map, we will see each key becomes a file. So now app mode, log level, and inside the file there will be the value. Okay, so these are the two ways in which we can create in which we can use config map after creating. Okay, now we have secret. Now secret is basically, when we saw config map was basically used to store the sensitive non-sensitive data, sorry, but the secret is basically to store the sensitive data like database password, API keys, tokens, TLS certificate. So it works similar to config map but intended for confidential data. So we'll see when we are creating secret, when we were creating the what you say config map, we were not using base 64 encoding, but in secret we will use it, and it will be opaque. The type we have to give opaque. So we are creating API version v1, kind will be secret, metadata db secret, and type will be opaque, and we have to give base 64 encoded data. We don't have to give the password in like that when we are creating the secret. So this is what is the main difference between config map and secret. Okay, once you created kubectl, now we can again there are two ways to use them in the application. First way is inject secret is environment variable, so we need to give environment, and then which environment variable, if suppose we are using this key in our code, so this key in the code should get the value from secret key ref, and the secret key ref which value should be picked, db secret, and the key is this. Okay, so this is the value which will be there in the code, and this the value of db password will come from secret. Okay, and once this is been used in pod, and when we see kubectl exec db password, we'll see base 64 encoded data. Okay, now if we have to mount it as files, so similarly we need to first create the volume, and then from the db secret, and then we need to mount it to this path. Okay, so this is what how we create a config map and secret, and we use. Okay, now very important topic, why secrets are not encrypted by default. It's just base 64 encoded, so there is a difference between encoding and encryption. Okay, so only base 64, and those are not encrypted by default. So anyone with cluster access can do kubectl get secret, and if they do decoding with base 64, they can see the password. Okay, but those are not, that is not called encryption. So why is it like that? Because Kubernetes stores secret in etcd. So etcd does not encrypt secrets by default. Encryption at rest must be manually enabled. So encryption is not happening. Encoding and decoding can be done. So how to actually secure secret? By enabling encryption at rest or using RBAC properly, so that we people with are getting the minimum access to get list of what secrets, or use external secret manager like HashiCorp or Vault. Instead of using the Kubernetes secret like this, use HashiCorp or Vault. There the secrets are kept, and from there we are fetching, or AWS secret manager or Azure Key Vault. So use sealed secrets. So when to use what? Use config map when we have to use non-sensitive data, feature flags, logging level, app config, non-sensitive settings. But use secret when we have to use db password, OAuth token, TLS cert, or private keys. So best practices: never commit plain secrets to Git, use airbag restriction, enable etcd encryption, rotate secrets periodically, use external secret manager in prod, and avoid exposing secret via environment wars if possible. Okay, so so common interview questions I have also given, like difference between config map and secret, are Kubernetes secret encrypted, or how do you secure secrets in production, can we update config map without restarting, what happens if secret changes. Okay, now these questions try to answer, and I have also a small assignment. So we need to create a config map for non-sensitive configuration, secret for sensitive, and we need to try both the methods as environment variables and mounted files. Okay, so first of all, create config map with this name, with this key value. Okay, and then create try to inject it first as environment variables in the pod for, and then as as mounting config map as files. Then part 2 is create secret with these values, key values, and use base 64 encoding, and again try to inject secret as environment variable and mount secret as file. So I'll give all this in description box, please try so that you get the better understanding of this concept. So yeah, that's all. So that's all for today's video. I hope it's helpful. Please let me know your views in the comment section. Till then, take care. Bye.